Hello, welcome back to my channel, Untamed Tales. I just want to let you know that this is my second book review. The first book review that I did was Where the Crawdads Sing. But my book reviews are completely unedited. Not that I wouldn't like to edit them, just that I'm really bad with technology, and maybe at some point I will learn a little bit more and my videos will be a little higher quality, a little better lighting, a little better to hear. But for now, I'm really hoping that my mistakes will be endearing, but my overall content will be solid. The book that I'm reviewing this time is The Four Winds by Kristin Hannah. And one thing that I found really appealing with this book and with other Kristin Hannah books is that it's written by a female and it also has a female protagonist. I found this statistic online that said that 70% of books written are written by men and 65% have male protagonists. So I just think it's really neat that this book is written by a female, also has a female protagonist. I think it's important that female voices and perspectives are heard. That's one thing I really like. The other thing that kind of popped into my mind when I'm reading is, why do people read? And one of those reasons, I think, is to improve our ability to empathize with others, to improve our insights not only into our own lives but into the lives of other people. And this book will deliver that. It does just that. The book's main character, her name is Elsa. Book takes place during the Great Depression. It's a historical fiction. Most of Kristin Hannah's books have some element of romance or love kind of intertwined in the struggle of the main protagonist. And this one does as well. The first couple of pages really draw you in, and the whole book will captivate you. It's one of those books that you'll read in a couple of days. At least for me, it was one of those books. And just kind of a disclaimer that I am no scholar. I'm definitely not a person that reads a book like every day. I didn't go to school for English or anything like that. I just really like to read, and I really like to kind of talk about some of the topics that come up and try to gain knowledge and perspective. And so that's just kind of, my whole angle on this, and not that I am in any way an expert. Just, so you know. So the main character, Elsa, in this book has rheumatoid fever when she's younger. And because of this, her parents kind of shelter her, and they're nervous. They're nervous for her health. So she spends a lot of time by herself in her room, not overexerting herself. But as you read the book, you realize that the real reason that her parents kind of shelter her is because of they're image conscious. They're kind of superficial. They're kind of high society, make a lot of money, and Elsa doesn't fit their image of what a perfect daughter should be. And almost to add salt to the wound, she has two sisters who are treated completely differently than she is. And I guess it just speaks to the fact that, when we kind of go back to the thing of one of the reasons that we read is kind of to improve our ability to empathize with other people. When you read this book, you do really put yourself in that painful situation of having two parents who shame you, who don't approve of you, don't hear you, don't see you, are constantly criticizing you, and you wonder how someone can get through with all of that pain to the psyche. It's heartbreaking really to read and to know that in reality there are people who have situations like that. And it is, I think, also important to remember the impact that one true friend or one person you truly feel like you belong with what that effect can have on somebody's life and getting them through some of these really hard family lives. The other thing I think it does is it gives people perspective. I can imagine it might give somebody perspective. Somebody who's kind of lived through a lot of family criticism, that in this book you can kind of see that the way that the family portrayed her or painted her life, it's not accurate. So it kind of makes you kind of step back and say, hey, my parents' view on me or the way that I grew up might not have been accurate. And maybe it can help someone to kind of disregard that false narrative that they've been told sooner, by reading somebody else's story and realizing how ludicrous it is that somebody was treating a person that way. So I think that is one of these kind of really enduring understandings that we can kind of pull out of this book that can kind of help people within their own life. So there's also this really sad part in the book where Elsa is trying to do anything she can to kind of feel alive, to feel seen. And she goes into town, and she buys this red silk, and she makes herself this red dress. And she finally gets up the courage. She cuts her hair as well. And she finally gets up the courage to go downstairs to where her parents and sisters are. And of course, the reaction is lackluster and just devastating to Elsa. Her father calls her a harlot, tells her to go upstairs and take the dress off. She's an embarrassment to the family. And once again, just cutting her down and just dimming her light ever so much each interaction that they have. The parents never say anything nice to Elsa ever in the book. And she decides to defy the parents. She wants to go to a speakeasy. She decides to defy them, even though they're telling her to go back into her room and change. And she leaves, and she gets to the speakeasy, and they won't let her in because they're afraid of the ramifications of what would happen if the father had found out that they let Elsa in there. Anyway, so that night, she ends up walking around and meeting this guy named Raph. He's Italian, and he's a dreamer, and Elsa at this point is a dreamer because that's all she has. She's in her room with her books, with her imagination, and so they're both kind of lonely and looking for more out of life, and they connect. They start a relationship in a way. It's not like a formal relationship, but they're kind of there for each other. But Raph is supposed to be going to college soon, so it's going to be short-lived. Anyway, Elsa meets Raph. She goes back home that night, and her father ends up, because she disobeyed him, the father ends up cracking her on the jaw, and Elsa falls to the floor. And again, it's just more and more suppression of her soul, basically. And later in the book, they're at a party, and the sisters are wearing the red silk, and it just kills Elsa to see how her sisters can wear the red silk, but for her, it was an embarrassment and a shame to the family. It's just very sad indeed. Elsa has a grandfather that has since passed, but her grandfather was really a source of motivation and really uplifting. He was the only one that ever really took Elsa's side, and he would say things like, Elsa, you shouldn't be worried about dying. You should be worried about not living, and just be brave, and to just dare to dream, dare to fulfill your dreams. So when she ends up having a child later in the book, she names her child Loretta, and it's named after the grandfather because he was born in Laredo. So she names her first child after her grandfather. This book is definitely a book about motherhood, how it can be bittersweet, how there can be trials and tribulations, how you can love them so much, yet they can try you on so many levels so often. And mothers will definitely they'll definitely relate to some of the struggles, some of the ups and downs that Elsa goes through with her two children. And what she does, essentially to the sacrifices basically that she makes for her children to help them live their best lives. And there's a lot of sacrifices that Elsa makes throughout the book. Elsa does finally find a place to belong, but it's not too long before she's forced to kind of leave that situation in the book, which is a really, really hard, gut-wrenching decision for her, but one that has to be made. And when you read the book, you will understand why. The book also has some themes in it that talk about what would you do if you saw injustice? What lengths would you go to correct or to make societal change for the better? How much are you willing to put at stake? And I often ask myself that question, what would I do if I were in a true crisis? So that's something I think that people grapple with a lot. Moving forward and righting wrongs in our world comes at a price, especially if it's on the forefront of that change. And just how far would you be willing to go? It also talks about, I think, the responsibility of people to take care of each other, the responsibility of us to reach out to each other, the importance of belonging and being our authentic selves, because when you are not our authentic selves, are we really living? You might realize that you've been living most of your life being inauthentic, and I think that sometimes that leads to regret later on in people's lives. And if we can kind of learn from reading a story how to be more authentic on a daily basis, that could create real change in somebody's life. That's where, knowledge and insight and ability to empathize through a book can actually create real world change in a person. And I think that is the biggest goal of all when reading. Another interesting thing about this book is that Kristin Hannah originally was going to school to be a lawyer, and her mother at the time was diagnosed with advanced stage cancer. And so she would go and visit her mother, and she was complaining that she didn't really like one of her classes, and her mother was like, "Oh, you're going to be a writer anyway." And Kristin Hannah ended up kind of taking that to heart, and Kristin Hannah and her mother together wrote her first book. And so in a lot of Kristin Hannah's books, you'll see that there's a lot of struggle, and they're not just kind of these happy-go-lucky, always have a great ending, feel-good books. There's a lot of struggle, a lot of perseverance, a lot of resilience that goes into that. And I think it kind of, if you look at it in terms of her own life with her own mom, there was a lot of struggle there, kind of dealing with the fact that her mom had this advanced stage cancer. But some of the best things in her life came from it. Her relationship with her mother was that much closer. They kind of made this first book together. It kind of was her true life calling. So just kind of interesting that her life kind of juxtapose Kristin Hannah's real life with some of the themes that are in her book. The other thing is that she does say in her books, and I'm trying to find where the quote is, "I do put my characters through terrible things. In doing that, they find out who they really are." One interesting thought that I had is that in the book, and I hope this is not too much of a spoiler, but there's a character, I won't say exactly who, there's a character who kind of goes off on their own way and is kind of, was very prominent and then is not. I think it would be very kind of interesting to kind of write a book about what happened to that other character. Just because it would help kind of highlight another perspective or another story of why people end up doing the things that they do. So this is definitely really a good book. It's not, at the end of it though, it's a little depressing. It's not a feel-good book. So I think I was gonna read another one of Kristen Hanna's books after this, but I think I need to put it down for a little bit. They can be very emotionally taxing, meaningful but very emotionally taxing. So I'm going to maybe switch gears a little bit and read a book that has maybe a different themes kind of throughout, and maybe go back to Kristen Hanna in a little bit. I do hope that you enjoy my book review. My kids were telling me that I did not say to like and subscribe. I find it really exciting that I think I had like 27 views on my last book review. And while it's not a lot of views, I'd only told like 5 of my family members. I haven't told any of my friends that I was doing book reviews. So I'm like, wow, there's like 22 people that are just watching this that I don't know, and I just think it's neat, even though it's not a lot. I do have people who are interested enough to watch. So definitely like and subscribe, and that would definitely make my day. And if I were going to give this book a rating, I would definitely. I am not super critical. If a book moves me in an emotional way, I generally give it a very good ranking. And I would have to give this book a 5 out of 5. It was, like I said, it captivated all the way through. I did learn and get perspective and improve my insight on my life and other people's lives. It made me think about social justice. It made me think about, gratitude. What Elsa goes through, what her children go through, what her parent-in-laws go throughout this book is a very hard life. And obviously it was during the Depression, so it's going to be hard, but it really kind of highlighted it in this book and just made me feel grateful for the life that I have. So yes, I hope you enjoyed my book review, and I hope you will come back to see another, even though they are very, not very tech savvy.